Folks, what if I told you that President Trump was going to make history this election cycle? And it's not going to be with a speech or an executive order. It's going to be with a map. There's 3 Senate seats that could be flipped right now, specifically in Georgia, Michigan, and New Hampshire. They're all very winnable. And if Republicans can close out all 3 this November, when history says that President Trump's party is supposed to be losing ground everywhere, well, we won't just win the Senate or hold it, we'll expand it. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly where each of these 3 races stand right now. You're going to know the money behind each one. And I'm going to tell you something that broke today that's already scrambling the Democrats in one of them. You see, this cycle is pretty magical. And I want to start out in Georgia. Republican congressman and my friend, Mike Collins, won a 3-way primary runoff this June. He beat former football coach Derek Dooley by more than 10 points. Mike had President Trump's endorsement, and he's facing Democratic incumbent Jon Ossoff in a state that Trump carried by 2 points in 2024. But here's the number that actually tells you something. Ossoff has raised over $80 million this cycle, and he's sitting on more than $32 million cash on hand. Collins, on the other hand, he's raised about $5 million, and he has over $1 million in the bank. Now, think about that for a second. No Democrat, or anybody for that matter, raises $80 million for a race in a state or a seat that they're confident about. That kind of money is fear. It's not comfort. And the underlying number that still hasn't changed is that Ossoff won this seat in the first place by just over 1 point in January of 21 in a runoff. So this isn't a Democratic stronghold with a war chest, folks. This is one of those tight states, okay? It's one of the tightest in the country. And the size of the war chest that Ossoff has is the loudest confirmation of the fact that you're going to find in any election across the country. Now, let's talk about target number 2. Okay, that's Michigan. And this is where I need you to pay attention because something happened in this race today. See, Gary Peters is retiring and he's leaving his seat open for the first time in over a decade. Republican former Congressman Mike Rogers, he's ran this race before in 24. He lost by 0.3%. It was the second closest Senate race in the entire country. All right. Trump carried Michigan by 1 point. Rogers is unopposed. Okay. He ran his primary with no opponent. He's sitting on the largest cash advantage of the cycle heading into the election. Here's what happened today. Democratic State Senator Mallory McMorrow suspended her campaign for this seat just a few hours ago, right before I sat down to record this. That leaves a 2-person fight on the Democrat side between an establishment-favored Haley Stevens, who's backed by Chuck Schumer, and has been propped up by outside spending to the tune of millions from AIPAC, and a progressive named Abdul al-Said, who's backed by Bernie Sanders and AOC. And al-Said's campaign has been accusing the party leaders of rigging the primary in Stevens' favor. Now, folks, this is not a party closing ranks behind a strong nominee. Okay, this is a party splitting in half. They're doing it nationally and they're replicating it in Michigan. And they're doing this in a seat that it can't afford to lose if it wants to win the majority. And Republicans aren't sitting on the sidelines while this plays out. The Senate Leadership Fund, which is a super PAC that's controlled by Senate Majority Leader John Thune, has committed $45 million to Michigan. It's their largest and earliest investment in the state ever. And the Sentinel Action Fund, another super PAC, added $15 million on top of that. So that's $60 million in outside Republican money that's already on the ground before Democrats have even picked their nominee. So this is going to be a fun one in Michigan. All right, target number 3, New Hampshire. Jeanne Shaheen is retiring. And the first time this seat has been open in the state since 2010. And Republican Jon Sununu, he's a former senator who's trying to win a seat back. And he faces Democratic Congressman Chris Pappas. Okay. Pappas has a fundraising edge, has about $4 million to Sununu's 2. But here's the part that the fundraising totals don't necessarily capture. Sununu has what every other candidate in the country would want and would have to pay a lot of money to get. That's name recognition. He has it. Okay. Then he has a legacy. His father ran the White House. His brother ran the state. President Trump's endorsed him. I mean, that's something you spend a lot of money to get. And there's also a precedent that's worth knowing. Sununu won this exact kind of open seat back in 2002. And it wasn't a good year for Republicans nationally. Since 21, the Republicans have also run the state government from top to bottom. The governorship, both legislative chambers. And it happens even though the state leans Democratic federally. And that gives him a machine that turns out votes red on the ground. Now, here's the one thing I'll say about how the professional pollsters have these races scored. And then I'm going to move on. All right, Inside Elections has Georgia and Michigan both rated toss-up right now. New Hampshire is rated tilt Democrat. A toss-up means it could go either way. Tilt means it's leaning, not locked. It's a big difference. But nobody rating these races is calling any of them safe or settled. And that's before you factor in Georgia's Democrat who's spending records amount of money out of fear. It's before you add in the Michigan primary that just blew up in public for the Democrats, or a New Hampshire Republican with a family name and a huge home field political machine behind him. Now, if we do the arithmetic, you should, because it matters. Republicans hold 53 Senate seats right now. Flip Georgia and Michigan alone, and we'll have 55. Land all three, and Republicans will be sitting at 56. That's in a midterm year, under a technically first-term president. That's when the history books say that the president sitting is supposed to lose everywhere. Now, here's what I want you to take away from this. Georgia's incumbent is spending record money because it knows exactly how close the state actually is. He understands the power of President Trump's endorsement. Michigan's opposition and the Democratic Party just split itself in half in public. And they're aligning in a fight between the establishment and the progressives. We just seen what the progressives are doing in New York. And this happened the same day Republicans confirmed nearly 60 million or more in outside spending on the ground there. The New Hampshire's Republican, he's a strong candidate with name recognition and a state government machine that really no funding total can fully capture. 3 toss-up and tilt races, and every single new piece of information that comes out makes the Republican case stronger and the Democrats weaker. So here's what I want to know from you, because I value your opinion. Number one, do you think Georgia's Democrat massive war chest looks like confidence, or do you think it looks like panic? Number two, what do you think about the Michigan Democratic split? What do you think about the progressives, the Mamdani, AOC, Bernie Sanders versus the establishment? Think that's going to help either side, or do you think it's just going to allow the Republican Mike Rogers to walk in the front door? And number three, what do you think about Sununu, his family name, the Trump endorsement? Do you think he'll be able to close New Hampshire's gap, or do you think the state's recent history will hold? Put your answer in the comments, because I read every one of them. And if you want to track all 3 of these races as they move, especially in Georgia, where my friend Mike Collins is going to be the next senator, keep coming back, okay? Because we're going to be tracking this all the way to November. So thanks for watching, folks. We'll see you in the next one.